people who have quit their jobs on the spot. What was the moment when you finally snapped?
My father had a heart attack and I asked for some time off or even just a few specific days off a week. I worked part-time anyways, so I could make regular trips to my parents' house, about an hour and a half away, and help out until he was back on his feet. My manager said you have to decide what's more important, your job or your family. Easiest decision of my life. My dad's doing great BTW.
My grandmother had been coming for Easter. I requested off 3 months in advance, got it approved. 3 days before I'm told I absolutely must work Easter, or I lose my job. Nope, have fun being short-staffed because you aren't replacing me in time, bye.
I quit a part-time job when my idiot of a manager changed the schedule on Wednesday, so I was scheduled to work on Thursday, which was a night I had made clear I couldn't work due to my full-time job. Of course he doesn't tell me he changed the schedule. I get home Thursday, dead tired, and pour myself a glass of wine and settle in for my first quiet evening in ages. And the phone rings. It's the idiot of a manager's boss asking why I wasn't at work. So I pull out my copy of the schedule and tell him exactly when I was scheduled to work. He asks, "So, are you coming in?" I paused as if I was considering it, then answered, "No, I'm quitting. Zero regrets."
I found out that the owner of a Quiznos had been rounding my hours down on my paychecks, and when I confronted her about it she blowed it off and said I was making way too big a deal over some $40. Then she said, "The Pepsi order isn't going to put itself away, you know." I went out to the front of the store just as people started to line up for the lunch rush and I took my apron off and left. Halfway to the door the store manager caught up to me and we left together, and the store owner only caught onto it as she saw us leaving the parking lot. Edit: I appreciate all of your concerns and responses. This job ended back in 2005 and the building no longer exists, so I'm not worried about it now, but damn, I could have used this info back then. I was petty enough to go to war over $40. Nothing serious. I was hired at a company and was promised $13.50 an hour. Well, first check came and it was for 13. Told my supervisor. Second and third check came and nothing changed. Went to my manager both times. We got paid every fortnight. When I got my 5th check and I saw nothing had changed, I just quit on the spot.
I was hired as a janitor at a movie theater when I was a teenager. I found out that everyone who was hired the week before me were being paid $1 more an hour. I was getting glowing reviews, because I was actually doing my job and working hard, rather than slacking off like most every one of those other kids. So I asked the manager if I could get a raise to get paid evenly with them. I was told tough luck. It was the end of my shift, and I never came back. I was scheduled for full-time the next week, but I didn't answer my phone when they called asking where I was, and left for a road trip with a buddy instead.
I worked at a grocery store as a bagger and they asked me to clean a destroyed bathroom. I mean, shit everywhere. All over the toilet, the walls, the fucking ceiling. Anyways, I said this is not worth my minimum wage and left. Worst part is my friend got me the job there and they saved it for him to clean the next day. He quit on the spot also.
On a Monday morning, after my and my team's paycheck had been 2 weeks late, for like 100th time, I asked the boss if he had wired the money at all, as he had a habit of lying that he did, only to wire it days later, to which he responded with, "We don't fucking start a fucking work week with such questions. We start it with fucking reports from the week before." Fuck him.
I worked for a local Target in electronics. A store manager who was not my direct manager called me at my father's funeral to ask where I was and why I wasn't at the electronics boat, cash register. Days earlier I had told my manager that I wouldn't be there because I had to attend my father's funeral, was told it was okay. But this other manager just wasn't having it and explained to me that she was in the store the same day her child was born. I have never worked for a more ignorant and inept manager.
Worked at a petland in high school. They didn't take very good care of the animals. A vet visited once a week, but if anything happened in the meantime there was no taking them anywhere. I only worked there about a month. I opened with the manager one day and 2 lovebirds had gotten in a fight overnight. One lost a foot. My manager took it to the back, put it in a small cage and put a towel over it. I kept asking when the vet was coming and my manager kept brushing it off. By midday it was apparent they were just going to let it die, out of sight, out of mind. They finally said the vet would be in 3 days like it was no big deal. I cried, ran out and never went back. I've told everyone I've known since then how awful they are. In hindsight I wish I would have done more, but teen me didn't have the backbone I do now. Pallet of packs of bottled water toppled over, pinning me against a wall. Managed to get my radio and ask from someone to come out the back and help me immediately. 15 minutes later I get assistance, not from the staff mind you, someone coming in to start their shift. Hauling pallets is meant to be a 2-person job, but in the 4 years I was on delivery it was almost always just me. Oh, and I only got put on delivery because the guy who was doing it before popped the end of his little finger off when a poorly stacked pallet caught his hand between a door and the stock.
I had found a higher paying job, but decided to stay when the boss decided he'll match the pay because he didn't want to lose me. So come time payday, I noticed my pay hasn't been raised. He again promises me he'll get to it. After 2 weeks of giving me the runaround and not raising my pay, I quit during a busy shift by simply just walking out and not saying a word. I ended up ghosting them, so to speak. I just feel bad for the co-workers who had to pick up my job. Oh well, not my problem anymore.
My first job was a telemarketer as a senior high school student. I should have known it was super shady by our script showing lots of locations crossed out from where they were located previously and the office looking like it could be packed up at any moment. Even the script had canned responses to questions like how much money is it in total? And we were supposed to answer I'm not really sure. I'm not very good at math. Anyways, everything was confirmed when I became friends with one of the most tenured telemarketers there. And he said they basically get your credit card and charge a whole bunch of money on it, which is the lump sum plus all these hidden fees, charges. I quit at the end of the day.
I was working at a call center where we did home retention. No papers or pens were allowed on your desk. Understandable, BC, you can steal AG numbers. I was sick and blowing my nose when I got written up for having a tissue at my desk. A whole lot had been leading up to that moment, but I yelled I quit. With my hands above my head and proudly walked out of that place and never looked back. I don't recommend burning bridges, but I never saw any repercussions.
Telemarketing. The job sucked, but I needed the cash and knew that going in. My first day after training, I overheard 2 supervisors talking about the product I was selling. It was basically travel insurance. Lame, but okay. But the guy says we only call people with poor credit because we know most of them won't look into it once it shows up on their card. I just couldn't bring myself to scam people, no matter how much I needed the cash.
I worked at a call center in Canada that sold phone packages for a major US phone network. It was cold calls and we could see the customer's average monthly phone bill when we were speaking to them. I had an elderly lady whose bill was in the $30 a month range, never made long-distance calls, didn't want or need voicemail, etc. I didn't even bother trying to sell her a package worth $120 a month. I didn't know I was being audited on that call, and was called into the manager's office and had a strip tore off me. Quit on the spot. Edit, for those of you who have never heard the term tear a strip off or some variation. It pretty much means to get yelled at, etc. I don't know if it's a Canadian thing or maritime thing as I'm from the East Coast. Second edit, it was 2005, the package was for a landline service. It didn't even include internet. We actually had a separate team that would cold call to sell DSL.
This job is more important than your education. Edit, I worked at McDonald's.
I had a boss that would schedule me 6 days a week, all split shifts, which would generally be 10:03, then 5:10, which pretty much took up all my time. One day she was on my ass about how I don't seem motivated to be here, that I'm lazy and to come back after my split with a better attitude. I told her I'm not coming back and she can fuck off.
It was just when I was in high school working at McDonald's. Before they would give you a raise you had to do all this bullshit, train people, watch videos, take quizzes, really easy but annoying and tedious. I did all of this, didn't get the raise. I asked every store manager and they said that it would show up on my next check. Eventually I called the regional manager who had put his phone up in the break room, but he answered "Don't call this number" and hung up on me. So I told my boss I quit and just walked out.
I'm a cook and it was 2 stages. The first stage was my boss moved me from nice weekday prep shifts to busy weekend night closing shifts without asking me or even discussing it with me. She just posted the schedule. This was because the night cook quit due to the crazy workload of night shifts. Second stage was a busy Saturday night when all hell just broke loose. Had order tickets puking out of the machine with no end in sight. About 3 hours in, I remember going into the walk-in freezer, closing my eyes while breathing deep and hard in a panic. I was just trying to calm myself. I think it was the first time in my life I actually had a panic attack, or close to it. Finished the night, cleaned the kitchen up, and went home. Wrote out my 2-week notice and gave it to my boss the next day. No job is worth that level of stress. We should have had 2-3 cooks in that kitchen for how busy it was on the weekends, not 1.
I was working in a ski shop at a local ski resort. They used a shuttle to ferry us up and down the canyon since most employees lived in a town nearby. They asked me if I was taking the shuttle and said yes, but that I needed to put away the cash drawer real quick. When I finished and went down to meet them, they were gone. I was stuck on the mountain, without a vehicle, in -17-degree weather. Luckily my family had a cabin about 10 miles away to which I had a key. But I emailed my resignation on my walk to the cabin.
I woke up at 2:20 a.m., sat straight up in my bed and said I hate my fucking boss. Then I proceeded to write a scathing resignation letter. I gave 2 weeks notice, but my resignation letter was such a thorough rebuke that I was walked out within an hour of submitting it to HR. They paid me for the 2 weeks, but had security escort me out immediately. I did this the day after a coworker snapped, made a big scene and stormed off in a huff. Edit, typo edit, I am eligible for rehire. Edit, I spent the next 4 months building a coral reef in my bedroom.
Worked at Staples. Got transferred to a shitty store where I moved. After being top of sales for 3 months, new boss tells me I am the worst seller he ever saw. He told me I didn't sell a single extra warranty for the month and a half I was there and stuff. Told him I was there for 3 months and was on top of regional charts for that entire time. He told me no, that I had no proof. I got up and left his office. He follows me in the store almost yelling for me to come back and that he wasn't done. I took my shirt off, put it on a shelf and left. I got a call next morning. My supervisor calls me, telling me the manager fucked up and wanted me back. He mistook me for another guy with the same first name as me. I told them to politely fuck off and that they would never see me again. Edit, no, my name is not Dwight.
When I was a teenager I worked briefly at a Wendy's. I was working a shift wherein I was informed that we were short on staff so it would be my responsibility to work the dine-in counter as well as the fryers. It was the middle of the dinner rush and my manager came out of the back office several times to yell at me about how dirty the dining room was, how slow service is on the fryers, or how long the lines are at the front counter. I asked her if she could come out of the office and back me up, and she told me in a very rude way that typically people of my race are more than capable of handling multiple responsibilities in the restaurant. As soon as the door was closed her office, I took my apron and hat off and walked out. A week later I showed up for my last paycheck and it was locked in her office and her assistant managers were all under orders not to allow me to have it. I filed a complaint with Wendy's corporate and they had the check mailed to my residence. I crossed my fingers hoping she'd lose her job, but I'm not sure if anything came of it.
I worked my way from cook to assistant manager at a booming restaurant. My shifts started doing amazing numbers from our internal metrics by a large margin and getting the big boss's attention. Store managers start scheduling very little to no crew members for my shifts. Had no cooks on Friday, Saturday night, so I'd have to do all the cooking and manage the front of the house. Store manager then promotes her freeloading nephew Steve, whom most of the staff hated. He had a constant huge discolored, gross STD sore on his lips which disgusted a lot of the customers who'd come in for a meal. One day it was just her nephew and I for like the first 2 hours of my shift. Her nephew just walked around aimlessly with a clipboard and wouldn't help at all when I asked. Took off my apron, threw it on the counter, got in my car and just drove away. I read reviews recently and it dropped from a 4+ star rating to below 2 stars with numerous complaints of how trashy, slow, racist, and rundown a place has turned into.
I had a job that always needed at least one person stationed there. At peak, it could go up to 6 if we opened other stations. Most times, I was the only person, but it was understood that if I requested a second person, I probably needed them, if not immediately, then within the next half hour. It was just after the Christmas peak, when we needed the 6, and an hour into my shift I realized one person wasn't enough, so started asking for another person. Kept asking every 15 minutes, because I was drowning, and it wasn't a slow drown. Second hour into the shift, an hour after I started asking, one of the managers decided to tell me the equivalent of "Oh, you're good. You don't need the help." Bitch, yes I do. And now? You need 2 people, because I quit.
Took a job opening up a new location handling all the regulatory and staffing needs. The owner offered me a permanent position and promised me xXPostapocalypseXx weekly pay plus bonus. When payday came it was xXPostapocalypseXx short. After 2 weeks I had to quote, Goodfellas https://2.b/3sgamprex48, then quit on the spot. It took over a month for me to get paid what was owed me.
Worked at Staples for 2 weeks when I first moved to NC. I got called into the manager's office one afternoon and the manager accused me of a bunch of shit I didn't fucking do. You don't go up to the registers fast enough, someone said you don't have a team first attitude, etc. like in my face berating me type shit. Completely caught me off guard cause I thought I was doing a decent job. Never gave me a chance to defend myself. He pulls out a stack of applications and says, "Cause I have a whole stack of people waiting to apply here, why should I focus on keeping you?" I laughed, didn't say a fucking word, and walked out of that place forever. Never looked back.
I literally just quit. So I worked at my company for 3 years and was asking for more responsibility and a raise. Was told there was no room in the budget. Alright, not a problem. The new kid that joined just a few months prior got a sign-on bonus, commission bonus and raise within 2-3 months. This kid loved to talk about everything. I told my boss I wanted to put in my 2 weeks and he just stared at me. I asked if he wanted to know why and he said, "I'm not having this conversation while you're being emotional." I laughed at him, walked inside and said my goodbyes and left on the spot. Now I'm enjoying my summer. Edit, I'm not a female. My boss just sat behind a computer most of his life and never learned people skills or how to handle confrontations. So he goes for a sarcastic response when in a corner.
My first job. I was 15. The owner was a drunk. It was a sub shop with a kitchen the size of an RV. I was doing dishes one day. The sink was really low and I was tall. After a while my back hurt. I went down on my knees making the sink perfect height. One look at me and he yelled at me to stand up. I said, "You don't have to yell, it is a small kitchen." He then threw a frying pan at the wall and said, "Get up." I slowly stood up and took my apron off. Shook the hand of the guy I worked with and said bye to the cashier, Meredith. He asked me what I was doing. I said what I should have done and walked out. I walked for miles and cried a little. I was embarrassed. I quit my first job after only 6 months. Called my parents in defeat and they actually understood and backed me up. I am 30 now and will never put up with that again.
I was freshly 18 working for a call center that did political polling during election cycles, and brand questionnaires during the off-seasons. I had requested time off weeks in advance, and had my request denied last minute because I was too good to not be there during a busy weekend. I tried to talk to the manager on duty, who smelled to high heaven of body odor, marijuana and patchouli oil, and he said quit bothering me about this shit. I proceeded to walk back to my cubicle, turned on the auto dialer, gave my manager the finger and walked out. Edit, unnecessary words.
Was unloading trucks at Walmart and this crackhead manager comes in saying, "Man, you're going slow, I'll do it faster than you." Mind you, she's 5'2" 100 pounds wet. I tell her, "Okay, you do it then, I don't get paid enough for this," and walked out. Reason I call her a crackhead is because it was found out months after she was stealing money from the registers and buying crack from another employee.
When I was in college, I waited tables at a restaurant that was open on Thanksgiving, after I had already worked the lunch shift, covering for someone who took off for the holiday. I was ready to finish my shift and head out so I could have Thanksgiving dinner with my family when my manager informed me that they were going to need me to cover dinner shift too because one of the older waitresses called out, probably to spend Thanksgiving with her family. When I told him I had plans already, he said I needed to cover the shift since I had the least seniority and they wouldn't need someone who isn't a team player, implying I'd be fired if I didn't cover it. I told him I don't need this job that much to miss Thanksgiving dinner with my family and handed in my apron and left and never returned.